Welcome everyone to the 2021 Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize finalist reading. My name is Ji Leong Ko, and I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of Gaudy Boy, an independent literary press based in New York City. I'm calling in from Harlem, and I'm wearing a black shirt and sitting in front of a bookshelf. My pronouns are he, him. We're so pleased that you're able to join us from wherever you are. Our poets tonight come from different parts of the world too, from the Caribbean, Europe, Southeast Asia, and North America. If you are here because you are family and friends or fans of our finalists, we want to give you a very special shout out for joining us. Gaudy Boy is the publishing arm of Singapore Unbound, a New York City-based literary nonprofit dedicated to the struggle for freedom of expression and equal rights for all. You can find Singapore Unbound at the link given at chat and sign up for our weekly newsletter. I'm going to put a link in chat now. In addition to publishing Vital Asian Voices, we organize a biannual literary festival and a monthly reading series in New York City. We also publish book reviews and original works of poetry, fiction, and literary nonfiction on our blog. The Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize is given out annually for a collection of poems written in English by a writer of Asian descent, residing anywhere in the world. The prize consists of $1,000 US and publication in the US and Singapore. This year is the 4th year of the prize, and we are so pleased to have garnered such a strong roster of finalists. It is, in fact, the quality of this year's finalists that prompted us to organize this reading, a first for us, as we believe that all 5 finalists deserve a wide audience for their work. Reading for you tonight, in the alphabetical order of their manuscript titles, are King Yanza, Miguel Barretto García, Andre Bagoo, Jhani Randhawa, and Amy Lam. We have been fortunate to have illustrious judges for the prize, including Pulitzer Prize winner Vijay Seshadri and Singapore Literature Prize winner Cyril Wong. No less illustrious is this year's judge, poetry scholar Dorothy Wang. Dorothy Wang is professor and chair of the American Studies program at Williams College. Her book, Thinking is Presence, Form, Race, and Subjectivity in Contemporary Asian American Poetry, published by Stanford University Press, won the Association for Asian American Studies Award for Best Book of Literary Criticism in 2016, and was chosen for the New Yorker's list of the books we loved in 2016 as well. She also conceived of and co-founded the Race and Poetry and Poetics in the UK Rapapuk Research Initiative based in the UK. Tonight, I will be introducing each of the 5 finalists in turn, and Dorothy will also be giving her comments on the manuscripts that she has read for this contest. First up, our very first reader is King Yanza. King is a writer from Lucena City, Quezon Province, the Philippines. His poems have appeared in Amberflora, Voice and Verse Poetry magazine, Sand, Berlin's English Literary Journal, and Cordite Poetry Review, among others. He previously worked as a pollution control officer of an auto dealership. He recently graduated with an MSc degree in Master of Science degree in Environmental Science and Ecosystem Management. So Dorothy, would you like to say a few words about King's manuscript, All the Distances Point to Home?
Thanks, G, and thanks to all the poets and everyone in the audience. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, hope so, yeah. I'm gonna be toggling back and forth between my Word document and Zoom, but I did wanna actually say a few things before I introduce King's wonderful poetry. I did wanna say just a few words that I think, you asked me to say a few words about my impressions from the general, just the finalist manuscript. So I'll make that very brief and then talk about King. So I did wanna say that I was very impressed by all the manuscripts, and I noticed certain linkages among them and between them. So I think all of them are written with a global diasporic perspective. And so there's like mentions of, it's just this like seamless thing, which is wonderful, but mentions of cities like New York and London, but also cities in the Philippines, Hong Kong. And what we see here is this kind of breakdown, I think, of a nationalist perspective on English poetry, which I think is great. I think for too long, the focus has always been on the United States and the UK. And so I found that impressive. I also think that all of the poets were very attuned to questions of empire, legacies of colonialism. They're children, we're all children of empire. And gee, we were gonna mention that today is 9/11, which is another, what happened in 9/11 was also linked to issues of empire. And the other thing I noticed about all the poets is that they're very attuned to the natural world, but also to the nature of man-made harm and global and climate change. So I found it really impressive, this sort of awareness of legacies of violence and militarism, but also just this very keen eye and ear for the specificities of everyday interactions and just details of everyday life. So I was very impressed by that with all of the manuscripts. So let me just say a few words about All My Distances Point to Home by King Yanza. So I found this volume of poetry to be poetry for our time, with its attention to the natural world and the precarity of the existence of that natural world. There is a poem entitled Post Landslide, and one about eels getting high on cocaine. Even King's tropes refer to the natural world, even when there isn't a poem specifically about nature. A lot of his tropes reference the natural world. For example, I'll quote a couple lines here. The purpose of life is to be deciduous. Two fallen leaves merged at the tips form a heart. Every heart palpitates the color of old photographs. So he writes of the states of love, erotic desire, longing, and in doing so joins the natural and the man-made world, and also joins planetary and quotidian time. And here's another quote. The sea is a gentle reminder of genes and secrets, always in a state of ceremony and unison. Any wood or metal drifting with intent carries a bride, caressing the mutable hands of water. And to me, his queer poetics reminds us of the links between different scales of existence, between the earth, the entire earth and the solar system, and also its link to the smallest details of human, plant, and animal life. So here's King. Turn it over to him. Yep.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Dr. Dorothy Wang, and hello to everyone who's tuning right now wherever you are in the world. Without further ado, I'll begin my reading now. The first poem is where I took the penultimate line from the final stanza, and that is what became the title of the entire collection. This one is called 4th of November. Mama got me a shirt, asked me to wear it, pays no mind to my remark. A red soccer shirt, how straight, I said. She does the mindful ironing on weekends. I watch, see a memory of her denial in the wrinkles. A spray of mist, weight of hot iron makes steam. In gliding motion, disappears into smooth, silky cloth. Here, making up for things takes time and form as little household gestures. I go out wearing the red shirt, meet my lover, tread the night downtown, sneaking kisses under a balete beside the bank. All my distances point to home, and I believe they're all right. The next poem that I'll be reading is my first attempt at queering global warming, and this one is entitled Under Permafrost. My distance from the surface is millions of years. With me are corpses and corpses of ferns and flowers. I have lived with death all my life. By heart, I am another world altogether. Brushing against my cold exterior is a warm embrace, and I melt as slow as a glacier into the shape of a poem, an ocean around me, unforgiving. I know of humans who've proclaimed stripping me down upsets the order, yet this world breathes like their demand to change. In haste, the air is fever, hot breath. My frozen wasteland mistakes it for desire to peel me to my histories, and I succumb. The air goes on, ever in its heat. Eventually, when there are more corpses on the surface than survivors, I will be open, dead inside, millions of years behind, and recognizing the sun as a concealing smile for rage. I would only ignite it further with spirits of decay, methane in my heart, ice completely melted into a long lyric of falling and rising waves. The next poem is, I guess, one of the sadder ones. This is inspired by a lesson from our old high school physics textbook. This one is entitled A Lesson in Falling. To demonstrate air resistance, we crumple one sheet of paper into a ball and keep a second sheet flat. Then we drop both pieces from the same height. The crumpled piece of paper will fall to the ground faster because it has a small surface area, so it comes in contact with fewer air molecules and is subject to less of the air pulling it back before impact. I wish I knew sooner that I could withstand what has always been the other half of coexisting. The spaces between dust just floating visibly in direct sunlight. The grains of a film from decades past that have made their way past the lungs of people who may still be alive. I remember because I am in bed. I curl up into a ball. My skin comes in contact with the pillows, blankets, sheets, and mattress. There is less of me, I think. The air can have less of me, else I bring myself to another height. The next poem this is about one of the many biogeochemical cycles that the planet goes through on a regular basis. And this one is called Carbon Cycle. The purpose of life is to be deciduous. Two fallen leaves, merged at the tips, form a heart. Every heart palpitates the color of old photographs. The final glimpse of ember is smoke. A lifetime of respiration is enough carbon dioxide to nourish an orchard. In exchange, more oxygen. Perspiration suffices to say there is an ocean inside of us. All bodies breathe with all oceans as they craft intricate shells. Forests cling to the earth from which we dig out fresh water. Our skins will have completely shed a maximum average of 11 times before the last breath, at which point the body says, no harm, or tenderness remains forever. I hope you loved me enough. This is our inventory, a billion times and counting, a defiant shadow that brings heat. It will outlive most of us. A strange darkness, it is fully exposed to the sun. The last time we shed something of ourselves is the moment we become useful to the earth. Our warm touch will be missed. And I think this is the last poem that I'll be reading. This is one of the longer ones, I suppose. And this is about the feeling of disillusionment in an urban landscape, particularly in a metropolitan one. This one is entitled, Come Back to Earth. There are days when we sit down to have coffee. We trace its origins back to beans and the hands that picked them. We cup our cups with our cold hands until a key emerges, marshmallow-like. Staying afloat is a dance with air if the body does not anchor to the lack thereof. Sorry for the mornings afforded by smog and concrete obstructions. Just epaulette the light that taste buds bloom to. There are days when I recognize the scent of a man I stood beside on a train during the rush hour commute. All men are recognizable by the way their scent drowns in soot, sweat, and sour breaths. Pardon the plastic trees. We have been living so close to one another, the smoke has sealed their pores and began feeling like rubber. Just gauze what hurts with resin and glow powder. There are days when we hear but don't listen. The origins of the door jamb and the photophobic architecture brings us back to our cups of coffee. Don your shoulders with curtains of sun from shadows of clouds. Just come back to earth. Perhaps soon we can have days where we settle into the dark, just taking or talking about onions or moisture sneaking shelter in the biodegradable. Forgive the evening for playing a fine-tuned melody of feeling. The world is less a hand for you to hold. Thank you so much and have a good day, everyone.
Everyone, please feel free to unmute yourself and make noise for King.
Yay!
That's so amazing, King. You're so good. Oh, so proud of you. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, King, for that wonderful reading. Our next reader is Miguel Barretto García. Miguel holds a PhD in decision neuroscience at the University of Zürich. They also publish poems in Cebuano, many of them found in the online literary lighthouse, Kabisdak. Born in the Philippines to a mixed-race Chinese and Spanish heritage and to immigrant parents, Miguel likewise immigrated to Europe as a graduate student in 2012. They are currently living between London and Zurich. And of course, we're going to hear from Dorothy on Miguel's manuscript titled Ambit.
Great. Okay, so from the opening lines of the opening poem, the poet or the poetic speaker in Ambit makes clear an awareness of states of liminality and ambivalence. Many of the poems deal with what it means to have a mother, but to also feel orphaned. Mother tongue, motherland. These poems are about both and, not either or. They are sensitive to the complexities and contradictions of life. Feeling orphaned does not mean there is not a strong tie to family or culture. One poem is entitled, My Darling, the Philippines. The poet writes of the brutal dictates of masculine norms and expectations. And here is a quote from a couple of lines from a poem. Unsureness is a default state, what a fogged mirror sees, as still body is a collision, molecules scratching a wall of film negatives, wanting to emancipate sexuality like a ghost splashing from a candle wick, one by one. Both Filipino and American, the poetic speaker or speakers are global subjects, traversing New York City, London, the Philippines, and other places. Garcia speaks in their words, quote, in a language of questions. And of course, just as an afterthought, he holds a PhD in decision neuroscience. So I turn it over now to the poet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy and G, for the introduction. So I will be reading a couple of poems from the manuscript. I'll start with a poem called Mother of Pearl, and this is an after poem after Marian Chan's poem, some words after the aforementioned Heathen Peoples. I woke up with blonde hair, a young boy, and salt barnacling on skin. In the water, there is a mother of pearl. The oyster's mouth is silver-lipped, the pearl a hefty price. My knuckles open the water. My mother tongue is breath, gasping before it speaks. My small palm is holding a smaller palm, is hoping the mother of mothers inside. I swam to the shore, holding both breath and longing. There is a line and a blur, a mother standing, waiting, finding, the shortening between body and the shore in distance. But I'm farther from my motherland. I am Lolo's boy body buoyed in water. Lolo taught me how to swim. He taught me how to language. Mother was not the first word in my mouth. The word was baba, meaning father, meaning mouth. I remember mother feeding me her pearl necklaces. Her milk beads were iridescent. Boy tongue was full. Boyhood was motherless. Boys like me woke to no mothers, but mothers of pearl. I am an heirloom in a pawn shop. My mother is a portrait on the wall. My Lolo is sound, found behind a country I left. My Lolo is sitting beside my grandmother, my Lola. He talks about boyhood, how he swam to farm for pearls. I wonder if pearls wonder about their mothers. So the second poem I'll be reading is called My Disintegrated Reality Walks to Piccadilly Station Without the From preposition, which presupposes an origin, the where are you from question. What sort of soil did your mother lather on her porcelain bowl between her thighs to cover the miasma of your becoming? The smell was the beginning of sound, sonic barrier breaking placenta wall. Open, London Underground sliding door is a slice of mango. The sweet shape in your mouth dissolves in your mouth. The pit you discard grows because anything thrown away will always find a home. And you make home because you belong, because conjunction, conjoining you and your mother, The umbilical cord she wrapped with soil. The underground opens the bitter antiseptic of a hospital room where your mother is a metamorphosis of your mother. The mangoes in her basket are sweet, like memories dissolving in her mouth before reincarnated only as breath. Prefix for again, but no, you want to regain loss because what is lost finds a way home, walking from Piccadilly Station to where you had become without absence, but a presence when out in the city where everyone goes to a destination. You are going into the origin of your mother's circle where everything of milk is a deeper shape of sweet. The third poem that I'll be reading was actually a poem I wrote back in March during the height of the Asian American hate crime in the United States. The title of the poem is called The Crime, and it is after Hanif Abdurraqib's poem, The Prestige. A poem begins not when the line breaks, but where the skull scatters. Teapot, petals in the kitchen. Ai Weiwei smashing an urn. Ama left to pick herself up in the Bay Area streets. Fragments do not pick themselves up. They are swept away, left unnoticed until the sun pricks the eye. Only then heads look down and see an archipelago of canes, grocery bags, rolling mandarins, and still bodies. The poet is a bystander standing beside security guards in a shopping mall, sitting beside New York subway commuters. The poet is a crime. Their complicity only more evident the more they write, and the less they write. The poet is dealt with an impossible hand, and the poem reflects into the mirror as kaleidoscope, fragments containing smaller bodies bordered by the shatter and missing shard. What the poem sees are many fractured bone manifesting in America's festering, the residue and debris left suspended in the air of villages, men, women, children, forgotten. The poet waits until the tea is steep. It fogs the mirror like Ama's fogging memory, or history books leaving out detail for the imagination. Without witnesses, our stories are only fiction. The poet goes to excavate their home inside their mouth and burnt lip. The poem calls it home, even though home sounds foreign, mother tongue slipping in the mud while bombs were seeding rice paddies and English was growing in our mouths. The poet is aware of the irony of a poem written in English. The poet concedes not doing enough to pick up the language broken when spoken, to pick up the mother or father broken in the streets, but mother tongue speaks, curses, fights back. When the poet was a recluse, and the poem was a witness, the village was a kingdom, and the archipelago was an archipelago. Beaches thrive with trading ships from Canton to Cebu. They exchanged Thai silk, Mindanao gold, Ming porcelain ceramics, Han urns, Moluccan spices, Fujian tea leaves, Cebuano, mother of pearl. Their skin was even poetry, writing their honors, virtues, and ancestors into tattoos. They were not a race, but civilization refusing erasure. The poet fills the poem until margins are capsized with letters, until ink becomes the dye of bartered fabric. The poem lies a truth. The poem calls fiction history. And the last poem that I'll be reading is a short poem. It's called Empire. I wanted hands stolid as Romulus. He said, I will build empire because I am. Milk, fresh from his wolf mom, gave him bones that could cross Rubicons and ambitions greater than the knife behind Caesar's back. Want, a desire of the body, a flame, weight above empire's neck. A crack, sound of bone, an inflammation, burning joints, muscle, and skin. You know a body is wolfed when butterfly wings span a face, leaves, then is scarred by the sun. God and I, his son, shunned, a body enshadowed. My father bought my steroids from the drugstore, then stuffed a wishbone inside my throat. He wished for my mother's Ziploc to enwomb me. His disappointment, this immunodeficient lupus villain of lambs, herons, my father. My mother is my mother. That after I was diagnosed, she brings me to a butterfly garden. There, I am not a wolf, but a butterfly. I watch the chrysalis turn into empires. Thank you very much for listening to me read.
Yay!
Yes,
Yay,
everyone, please make
Miguel.
noise for Miguel.
That was so good.
So brilliant.
Wow.
Yes!
Wonderful, wonderful, Miguel. Thank you so much for reading for us in that beautiful manuscript ambit. And next up, our third reader this evening, if you're in New York, that is Andre Bagoo. Andre is an award-winning poet and writer from Trinidad, the author of several books of poetry, including Trick Vessels, Burn, and Pitch Lake. He was awarded the Charlotte and Isidore Paiwonsky, I'm going to massacre this, Paiwonsky Prize in 2017. His essay collection, The Undiscovered Country, was published by People Tree Press in 2020 and won the 2021 OCM Booker's Prize for Nonfiction. Over to you, Dorothy, for your comments on Andre's manuscript, Narcissus.
Thank you, G. Okay, just let me get to my document. So what strikes me about these poems is the intensity and almost religious intensity that the poet brings to aspects of everyday life and to issues of global poetics. There is an unspoken thread linking the pleasures and suffering of what we might deem personal matters, desire, love, sex, and quote unquote larger issues of social justice, such as the death of figures like Eric Williams, the father of Trinidad. And so I just want to quote, this is a short poem about the death of Eric Williams. I hope you weren't planning to read this, Andre, but I'll read it. You can read it again. I wanted to read it in its entirety to give people the kind of sense of the power of the intensity of these lines. So it's the title, there's a short poem, it's called The Death of Eric Williams, Who Ruled a Country with an Iron Grip. It was suicide, it was murder, it was an accident, it was an accidental suicide, it was an accidental murder, otherwise known as manslaughter. It was medical malpractice, it was a clerical error, it was supernatural intervention, it was the CIA, it was Moscow, it was the Black Power movement, it never happened, it was none of the above. The poem's state of emotions and political lenses work on multiple levels and in multiple contexts. Its queer poetics are both privately erotic, but also function as anti-colonial critique. So I'm gonna turn it over to Andre now.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor Wang, for that incredibly sensitive and attentive précis. I am absolutely delighted to be here tonight among such esteemed company, and I can't wait for all of these books to come into the world. And I'm really, really happy to get this opportunity to share poems, share these poems from Narcissus with you. First, the poem starts after the fight, when I go down on my knees and caress the flower of your forgiving cock, remembering the first time we kissed, empty streets confronting us with ourselves. When I'm laid in bed, I see you most clearly, but I see him too. all the versions of you jumbled up like the Pitch Lakes detritus, cans, branches, minerals. I didn't realize there would be so many firsts. First kiss, her lips absolutions for sins not yet enjoyed, for being unreachable. Then the beach that yawned with serene rage and spit a man at me, his hole harbored my fealty, held me until I saw in him a mirror, a wet face. Then the professor whose library was a manifesto of yearning for wetted fingers, for marbled hardness, and I made room for his, a new country where every day was the first day of something, and every night seagulls flew tall as dreams over fields singed by birds of paradise. All of the new, all of the old knowledge, a budding candle, candle turning to blaze. I didn't realize there would be so many days clear as coming out, days of coming out and coming out and coming out, because we are all of us stars that come out too soon for twilight, too late for dawn. And even after they die, there might still be light. Narcissus. In this white bed, all things are made into a dream in which I fall into a lake, a small pond in which I disappear or am met each day with a new man, one with a hare lip, one with accusations, eyes saying no, no, mumbling self-loathing. Mirror mad, I see them through a window that makes itself into a loving opening to some place that is a conspiracy designed to keep me from myself. Who are they? Who are they? Which is to say, after the beating, my world crumbled. I couldn't show anyone my face. More of them began to appear, one with a trust problem, another callous with friends. The shadows of Plato's cave slid up the bedroom wall, the past troubling the curtains, bodies buried among lace. They took my father's watch, which I would wear long after it stopped. My father who knew, who saw, who told me yes. Long after he rose from the water, having changed like the ship of Theseus. In rippled light he rose, pebbled tombstones left beneath the surface, marking small drownings, fallen masks, tiny surrenders to the randomness of water, to the crystalloid silk of each new body joyfully swum into. And he looked back at me, naked, and I saw anew. And in this wet circle, I loved him, you, and we knew. Chapter 2. That morning, the radio was playing a song that felt familiar, even if I didn't know the words, didn't understand the language. I recognized the grainy static, the tinny voice, the muffled beats as though they were my thrumming heart, as though they were the rain that had fallen last night on the galvanized roof as you slept on top of me, smelling of too much cologne, your two Venezuelan friends huddled on a bed in the corner, and something rising in their chests like bread dough breaths, soft clouds now floating into the air. As I dream out of the house, the yard, I pass the chickens, I pass the dogs, and someone follows me, or am I remembering correctly? I have a strange feeling, as I did the night before, a feeling that there are sagas inside me waiting to be written, epics as heavy as the gold chain you wore as you thrust into me, and I muffled my moans because it was also sketchy. And even as I surrendered to pleasure, I still thought the weight of your pendant slapping my flesh was like the weight of something I might one day carry, some foundation stone, some temple. I didn't know where the taxi stand was, and I asked a man who gave me directions, then decided he would walk the short distance with me. Later, I roamed Port of Spain, knowing everybody could tell what I'd done, could smell the smoke from the club on me, could look into my eyes and see the drag queen, the pole dancer, the small room with walls of mirrors, the graveled yard outside on which footsteps crunched like whispered secrets, and the groups of friends looking at each other cautiously from a distance, because tomorrow was the question. The final poem I'm going to read was inspired by the work of the Trinidadian artist Wendy Nanan, who did a series of sculptures called Baby Krishnas. And she was recently the subject of an exhibition at the American Museum of the Arts in Washington. And in really her work, this particular work engages in the fact that in Trinidad, so much progress has recently been made with regard to LGBTQ rights in the wake of a very watershed High Court ruling, which has decriminalized consensual sex among gay men. But nonetheless, that ruling is actually poised to be challenged in the courts momentarily. Because the sky is lighter than paper, a manifesto of feathers. Blue because my wings are the bookman's pages. Blue because the island is holy, the wind high. Blue as in azure, as in cadmium, as in noise. Blue and black because kisses hurt. Blue when they saw me, they saw us. Blue the night we were walking home, Josh, you and I, and the thugs. Blue the night outside the art gallery when they chased us, unwinged. Blue like Mary's robes, blue like the altar boy gown I wanted because it was fabulous. Blue when they threw me out of the church and I dreamt of Jesus, truly blue. And the cherub has turned blue, and the angel has turned blue, into Krishna blue. And I saw him one day in my dreams. Blue shirt of blue school uniform, blue invisibility, blue, he touched my spine and flutes sang in me. Blue, both mirror and mute. Blue the walls, the stones, the tomb. Blue once, but now, coolitude, créolité blue. Blue ontilité, négritude, bâtiment, not bâtiment. Blue for the way my heroes are dying, but blue mad for the second coming. Blue veins on every dick I ever sucked. Blue power, blue notes, the currency of blue. Melodies, you, rubber orchestras, true, blue blood and blue color and blue scrubs fighting red coats, blue ink for blue manifestos of blue feathers, disobedient walls. Graffiti is blue. Jack Molassie is blue and may be the second coming.
Yay!
Yes!
Thank you, everyone.
Wow, yes.
Oh, great,
That was so
Andre.
clever.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Andre. What a beautiful reading. And our fourth poet of this evening is Jhani Randhawa. Jhani is a queer Kenyan Punjabi / Anglo-American maker living in unceded Kumeyaay territory in Southern California. Jhani is the recipient of a Yasmin Fellowship from the Malay Colony for the Arts and is a recent finalist for the 2021 PEN Emerging Voices Fellowship. With Teo Rivera Dundas, Jhani is the co-founder and co-editor of Rivulet. Now over to you, Dorothy, for your comments on Jhani's manuscript, Time Regime.
Thank you, G. I told the audience, these are fabulous poems. They're wonderful. And okay, so sorry, I just got to get over to my Zoom, to my Word document. Okay, so Time Regime by Jhani Randhawa. This volume brings into conversation nature and history, the intellectual and the bodily, the experimental and the lyrical. There is a you or series of yous addressed throughout the volume. The work, like those of so many others we've heard tonight, has a diasporic sensibility with certain locations specified while others remain indeterminate. For example, mysterious landscapes, haunting and beautiful, that have a foot both in the human ravaged world and in the geography of the poetic imagination. Gender is traversed fluidly too. Randhawa's poetry is marked by an acute roaming intelligence, an eye for detail rendered into precise language, an expansive engagement with history, human and ecological, and an ear for poetic language. So this time, rather than quote from their poems, I will let Jhani unfold for the audience the power of their spectral, luminous work. Over to you.
Oh, wow. I don't know what to say. I'm just transported by all of the work that we've heard before. Truly transported. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Dorothy and G. I'm going to drop a link in the chat if you would like to read along to this work. So there's the link in the chat, and I will begin. Inside Daddy G's hands. Music for Walter Benjamin, who wrote, "History cannot be sought in the riverbed of a process of development. It is miraculously someday, 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 in geologic time, the scratch of water along an embankment. The air is alive where I am, boundary layers of a wound. My lover drives a vehicle through sudden fog, approaching the sea. We are coagulating in the night, accosted by fire. There is the negative pyramid approximated by elm branches, torn away by bovine teeth, and sodden with summer rain, a canister of liquid ignition. This is a ritual where something is aided in its diminishing. In one way of looking at it, I stitched a blessing into your finger, seeking to subtleize your ache. Make it surge, visible and glowing sharp. Together, we're seeking ruins in our ancestral language to clot around us, the physical bearing of history. There is contrapuntal. I dance inside what I was never meant to inherit, becoming hot, caked in ash and sweat. To offer these sounds back to the generations of birds disappeared in toxic fields, sprouting rice. We see our own throats swollen red. Ruins, these materials, the water. I can't imagine the sound. Sometimes I am deliberately working to remain unreachable, recognizing that I will be crossing a bridge until there's no skin left on my feet. And the second poem I'm going to read is a 6-part poem, and it's titled Bog for Azadeh Ahmadi. And this epigraph is part of Azadeh Ahmadi, my friend's note she wrote to me in the letter. Seeing a woman on the way to the sea, as if I have watched that scene so many times, even though I have not. 1. When it rains, sounds from the highway carry further through crow-filled firs. 2 miles ascending, traffic hits the house through water. I wake in the dark with the ricochet. The sun hasn't risen. I roam to a different room and I light a candle. Something moves beyond the dark passage of the window. the house-tall holly bush catching scent of a storm headed east from the Pacific. Sitting on the floor, I turn my computer on, adjust a remainder of delicate pink cloth over my head. The traditional thing, the respectful thing, the thing I feel I need to do for my Dadiji Zumbog, her transition into depth this morning, finally sung and punctuated by awkward camera angles, internet lag, Char Sahib swishing above the holy book, my brother, cousin, and my auntie bleating some words, rising from their kneeled spot on a cut of red carpet. 2. My lines, the walk to the sea and back, come from thread suturing their names together across the stars. It comes from the hairs and pores puckering against what prickles like cold, pressed tin cauterizing fingertips. I had a question about how far the pioneer's aura stretches, which is a question about suffusion. Against the intimacies smoked out in the awnings of cheap material construction, against the hill and the film of fog, and the moss-draped vision dome, and the cranes reaching toward mountain ice, against my cells and their clotting. The border city that drove out the Trans-Pacific revolutionaries, its migrant labor force, with sticks dipped in flame and with dogs. Before the migrants, it was the Salish speakers who would not be moved. Does the light stretch? It stretches, her arms tangled in gold and salt. Another clerk's girl descending from the steamship Kilindini harbor's backspray. I've been undulating since her passing, my breath shallow, her son's bulk collapsing and ricocheting down the stairs. To depart the traces, the ruins, to insist our intimacies, this presence. 3. I begin to feel sad for reasons that my dead grandmother might not have felt sad about. No women can facilitate Gurdwara service, perform Simran for a group gathered in a sacred place like this temple on the West London High Street. I wanted to hear the sounds of women carrying my grandmother away on a sea of pearls, but she disliked so many women. To be a woman was to win at a game stacked against you already, your poverty accrued through colonial land divestment, your tongue's shape around another occupier's language, the deaths of your sisters by your uncle's hands, or the creeping threat of it when the refugees would pass in caravan, winding a cord around the edges of villages. The game ensured that deliverance was sealed, not by your will, but by the gamblings of your brothers, gossip. Then you left the fabric of your home to stand in a line in a distant cold country. Pluck, 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 not you. In many ways, my grandmother was deeply tangled in this, until she decided to stop leaving her row house in the immigrant zone. 4. The waters and their theories, moving, unstuck from our bodies. I see my great uncle, Dadiji's brother, crying. He and his younger brother are the last living of 10 siblings, now that my grandmother has died. I owe him a call, but I'm scared. I make prashad, butter, atta, peanut flour, toasted almonds, sugar, and water. I have no jaggery, no ghee, no rose water. The wind picks up, and I can still hear automobiles carving through the cascades, a gray light moving across a dome of clouds. 5. Where it's no longer about traces, but presence, a theorist drops a pedal. An unquantifiable steam and torque of a shovel, the stickiness of things. The matte sound of rust against wet clay, against subducted agates. There is the arrival of a stranger and their quiet departure, leaving the body behind. I would call this the residue. I would call this residue the phenomenology of divining, where the squelching dug a place not quite long enough for the rabbit corpse to fit comfortably into. Another matte sound and the hovering above. where the petal falls. It is a tear chalky with calcium and the unsettling high frequency that wraps itself around only one ear. Where the presence is, where bodies are, a world of habits which puts certain objects within their reach. We could call this history, and we could call this memory, and these histories might surface on the body or even shape how bodies surface. These reaches of memory might be visited upon our bodies, the woman said, who has trembled in defiance against the heat. 6. Laughing slicks over my teeth, saliva gripping against winter's entrance. Dewdrop world is the dewdrop world, the poet writes. And yet. Her name calls me in at dawn, the snow wilting down, the broadleaf trees groaning under the weight. Your story of working to make the place upright in the bitter wind. My heartline forgetting the tearing shrug of holly under earthen waters. The calyx, the shoe, the death I am mourning. Or is it her life I am mourning? Or, as V says, the death of someone else crashes into one's mourning for one's own death. I don't know, but I know there is something there in sitting, infirm, in the beauty of that failure. Outside, I make cords out of ice and snowfall, the dew tangled frozen into a net. The cords I take and braid across the yard, from the rabbit's 2-foot deep grave to the front door. A world of suspended water, the ash of an ocean coming ashore. The wind is still. Thank you.
Yes.
So beautiful.
Thank you, Jhani. That
Thank you
was
so
amazing.
much.
That was so great.
Johnny.
Johnny.
Thank you so much, Jhani, for that really beautiful reading, very lyrical indeed. Thank you for sharing those words with us. Our last reader for this evening, our 5th finalist, is Amy Lam. Amy Lam was born in Hong Kong and lives in Toronto, Canada. She has worked as a visual artist and curator for the past 15 years and has exhibited conceptual film and performance works internationally. Lam is a MacDowell Fellow, Delphina Foundation alumna, and was longlisted for the Sobey Art Award in 2018. She has an MA in creative writing from Concordia University in Montreal. And now Dorothy will give some comments on Amy's manuscript with Sword.
Thank you, G. Last but not least, With Sword by Amy Ching-Yan Lam. These poems utilize deceptively simple language, for example, simple declarative sentences, the tone of a naif, yet they deliver powerful punches throughout. In one poem, the poetic speaker starts with observations about oatmeal, how she hated it as a kid, for example, and then these lines appear, quote, "The British in Hong Kong, an empire in the world. An empire acts like a natural fact, like an island, like oatmeal, like germs, like a stick, as if ancestry is a natural fact." Let me quote more fully from another poem to give you a sense of, again, this cumulative effect of her lines. "To become a master of literature, everyone must learn Chaucer's story of the pardoner. This is the literature of not only England, but the English language. The pardoner is a man selling forgiveness. He wears a little hat on his head, and he has a box full of bones. He says they're the bones of saints, and if you give him $100, you could buy one and dip it in the drinking well and be forgiven by God. The bones are just pig bones he got from the butcher shop, but he is a convincing storyteller, and he talks persuasively about right behavior. His speech is mellifluous, honeyed, stirring. If a listener understands the uses of language, they won't be tricked by him. If a listener is a sucker, though, well, salvation can still reach them. The English church says that salvation cannot be impeded by the people it passes through, not by a colonizer, not by a liar." And again, the cumulative power of the poems in this volume sneaks up on the reader, and that is no easy feat. So I turn it over to Amy.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you so much to the other poets, and I'm so honored to be in your company tonight, and I'm so excited to see all of your books out in the world. I'm going to read 3 poems from With Sword. The 4 Onions. 4 onions express 4 responses to living. They're planted in a crinkly plot. They were cut down to stumps but regrew long green blades. 4 floppy hollow shoots. When the air is hot, blood rushes to the surface of the skin. When the air is cold, blood rushes into the organs. This movement can create knowledge. Changes in temperature can bring about rushes of knowledge. Baby book. There are 5 books on a shelf. A baby book for myself as a baby, a children's book for myself as a child, a teen book for myself as a teen, an adult book for myself as an adult, a senior's book for myself as a senior. The baby book is printed on light blue inflatable plastic pages that can float in water. The children's book comes with a lock and key. The teen book has long horizontal pages that take 2 people to flip. The adult book is slim with thin rice paper. The senior's book is covered in mirror finish gemstone green. The books contain stories for me or someone like me. It's important that they're beautiful objects. There's also a piece of burnished mahogany on the shelf, a family heirloom. After decades, it still smells amazing. It smells like a spicy wind inside a delicate silk cage. Quote, taste and smell are the only senses that trigger memory. So I eat to try to remember my life as a baby. If I can eat what I ate when I was 1 year old, then maybe I can remember my memories. I'm just curious what it felt like to be a baby in the world's most expensive city, and by extension, parents raising a baby in the world's most expensive city. How does a city become the world's most expensive? This distinction can seem like a natural fact. It's so expensive here, said like it's an island, when it's because the colonial government lays claim to all of the land and then doles it out in limited contracts to favored parties, and then everybody has to rent from these parties. The British in Hong Kong, an empire in the world, an empire acts like a natural fact. Like an island, like oatmeal, like germs, like a stick, as if ancestry is a natural fact. On the television show, The Crown, the royal family is depicted as deeply unhappy. They have to keep procreating in a fixed way. The characters say things like, everybody has to make sacrifices, as if sacrifices are what constitute natural facts. Oatmeal, pate, smoothie, brown basmati. Now I eat oatmeal, but I used to hate it. I used to hate it so much I would have a standoff with it. I would let it grow cold on the table and only after lots of fighting, eat it congealed with the skin on top and continue to fight while eating it. My parents would say, you only do what you like to do. You don't do anything you don't like to do. Then they would sigh, but what a nice, obedient child you used to be. Before the oatmeal, I was quiet and never a problem at family functions. My only weakness was touching random things. When the oatmeal was finally finished, Mom and Dad would go to the restaurant and make meat sauce rotini. The other day, I read a book called Franklin is Afraid of the Dark. I wonder if my mom had once read it to me. Franklin, the turtle, is scared of small, dark places. He's afraid of the dark inside his own shell. He's so scared, he ties a rope around his shell and drags it around behind him. He doesn't like to go in it. I'm scared of the idea of sacrifice and what it does in families. My fear makes me run, but I still have to drag it along behind me. Anyway, Franklin goes for a walk. He meets other animals and tries to get help. Unfortunately, they can only offer him things that are helpful for themselves. A polar bear who is afraid of the cold offers a snowsuit. A duck who is afraid of deep water offers water wings. A lion who is afraid of loud noises offers earmuffs. Franklin wanders home all tired. His mother, scared that he was lost, gives him a big hug. He's so sleepy he can't help but crawl into his shell. He turns a nightlight on, and then he falls asleep inside the shell with the light on. The story is amazing because it's about a fear that's based on some essential part of yourself. It's about a fear of your own essence or something that defines you. And in the end, the fear is still there. The turtle doesn't get rid of it. To be clear, none of this applies to the royal family. They shouldn't be allowed to keep any of their jewels. A bit of steam, poof, gone. Here is the devotion of offering food to the no longer living, a detailed yet elegant explanation about how the oatmeal is made. Person watering flowers. Sunlight cracks heads. Water arcs from a hose onto flowers. A man gazes at his yellow chrysanthemums. He stands completely still while water arcs from the hose. Each yellow flower is enormous in proportion to its stem. The fact that they're upright rests against the fact that the water falls down. The man stands perfectly still. He stares at his flowers. The fact of uprightness comes from sweetness. I learned this in first aid. Taste it and see if it's sweet, he says. The way you can tell if the fluid around the brain is leaking out is if you taste it and it's sweet, the first aid instructor says. Because the brain swims in a sticky sugar syrup. The syrup helps take some of the weight off of the neck. Otherwise, our brains would be too heavy, he demonstrates, bringing his chin down to his chest. Put it between your forefinger and thumb to see if it's sticky, and then taste it. He walks around the classroom with his chin on his chest. In my apartment, there's a mouse who eats only ashes, and only special ashes, only the ashes of honey-scented candles. I put poison out because I wanted to stop eating my ashes. I read the label carefully, looking for the promise that the mouse will not die inside. I find the promise I'm looking for. The mouse will only die outside. If I pass this first aid course, I will also take the wilderness one. In the basement classroom, there's been a mass casualty incident. All 8 of us students have been stabbed by ballpoint pens, all in the same place on our legs. We tie tourniquets around our legs. The instructor says, never take the tourniquet off, ever, because rotten enzymes from rotting flesh will travel from dead tissue to other parts of the body, rotting the living parts as well. There is no pain in the rotting, only in the living. Bonk, bonk, bonk. The sun bangs against cars, asphalt, lampposts. The types of pain I'm most familiar with are sharp, nauseating, or tender, kneading. Air bounces off my head. It was the best thing I ever did, he says. The first aid instructor tells us the story of the best thing he ever did. He worked as a family doctor in Iran before moving to Canada. His practice was in a small town, and once he sewed 4 toes back onto a foot by himself without the proper equipment at 2 a.m. The toes came in a bucket filled with ice and he had to figure out which one went where. He was scared, he didn't know if it would work. You actually need a plastic surgery microscope for the veins, he says. But it worked. And then one day, the person showed up unannounced with the assistance of a friend and pastries and a bouquet and thanked him. 2,000-year-old fragment of a sculpture of a fist holding a flower. Thank you to sweetness tied up. Thank you to sweetness smashed and tied up. Thank you to sweetness smashed into dust. Thank you.
Yay!
Yay. Wonderful, Amy. Brilliant.
Wow, that was really wonderful.
That was crazy. That was so good.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was really, really beautiful reading and very funny too. You keep such a straight face. I don't know how you do it. It's so funny and so sad and so tender at the same time. Thank you so much for reading. And thank you to all our readers too for actually reading your work tonight. So over to you, Dorothy, to make the very difficult announcement, I'm sure.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I have the highest confidence and no doubt that all 5 of these manuscripts are going to get published. I think, I'm sorry about these pings. I can't remove them from my, but I wanted to say that they're just amazing, and they're all going to see the light of day. And it's a very difficult decision to have to choose one. And so, but again, I want to preface that, and I think everyone in the audience can see that these are all impressive collections. So the winner that I selected was Time Regime by Jhani Randhawa. And I know I'm not supposed to say a lot. Let me I know there's a longer citation. G's going to do a press release, but I just wanted to say very briefly a word or two, just to say that I was surprised this was a first collection that's not like you've not published a book. It's a very impressively realized work, and it actually feels like a second or third book to me. So I just wanted to say there's that sort of maturity and assurance in the voice. And while the lines are clearly in conversation with like the work of other poets, the poetry is really its own. So it's a wonderful debut. I think it'll be a great collection to the Gaudy Boy, to Gaudy Boy's list, but also to the world of poetry, as all the other poets' works will also be. And I just want to say that it's just I'm delighted to be able to help launch this, and to have a new book of poetry to teach and to share with others. So turn it over to you.
Oh my God.
Kim, would
thank
you like to put me
you.
back on? Hi, Jhani. Sorry, we didn't mean to put you on the spot. But if you would like to say anything, please do.
Just that I'm speechless. I don't know if I could totally speak, but it's an absolute honor to be also present with these finalists, just transported by all of your work and deeply in my body. I think I'm in another place, and I cannot wait to see all of your work in the world, and to read, and hopefully have a chance to read with you all again. And Dorothy and G, thank you so much. I will be deeply inarticulate and ungrateful in this moment because I'm so shocked and so honored. And I'd like to just turn it back to you. Thank you so much, Professor Wang and G.
Well, thank you so much, Jhani. Thank you again, Dorothy, for doing the hardest thing, that is to decide between all these really, really fantastic manuscripts. And I want to congratulate Jhani yet again on winning the 2021 Gaudy Boy Poetry Book Prize. Jhani's terrific book, it will become a book, Time Regime, will be published in April next year, so do look out for it. She thanked me and thanked Dorothy as well, but I also want here to acknowledge the Gaudy Boy team, many of whom are actually here in this meeting. Our managing editor, Kimberly Lim, who has been managing these transitions between people that you see on your screen so beautifully. Our assistant editor, Judy Luo, our editorial intern, Letitia, as well as our publicity intern, Isabel, as well. They are here tonight. And I just want to say that, nothing could have been done really without a team. It's really very much a team effort. That's what Gaudy Boy is. We want to thank all 5 finalists, King, Miguel, Andre, Jhani, and Amy, for sharing their work with us tonight. Poetry on the page can reach into our deepest solitude, whereas poetry read out loud can bind us together as a human community with the widest inclusiveness. I can't imagine a better thing to do on this significant day of 9/11 than to be here with all of you and listen to poetry. For all our guests, we hope that you have heard something from one or more of our poets tonight that will be a source of inspiration, encouragement, and comfort for the days to come. Next month, the second Saturday's reading series, of which this is a kickoff for the month of September, but next month in October, the series will be celebrating the launch of the first US edition of The Infinite Library and Other Stories, a collection of speculative fiction by the Filipino writer Victor Fernando R. Ocampo. Please join us to hear Victor read and discuss the tremendously exciting worlds of Southeast Asian speculative fiction. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending this time with us. We really, really cherish this time together, but we will have to say goodbye, at least for now. Bye now.
Congratulations, Jhani.
Congratulations.
Congrats, Jhani.